Give everybody a second to get on here in case they're waiting patiently for us to have our slightly late, also rescheduled AMA for today. Thank you for joining me and Vic, who's off into the distance over there.
Hello.
What are we talking about today? Today we're going to talk about, or I want to talk about turning on the switch, or just basically how to get serious when you want to get serious. I think it's a good conversation to have. It was an interesting game where you want to have a good time at it, and then part of that showing yourself that you're getting better also is that you have to be serious at some times to prove to yourself that you actually can do the thing. And I think that people have difficulty understanding what goes into how to actually do the thing when it's time to, and getting past all of the distractions that occur when you feel like it's important to make it happen. When you're just practicing, a lot of this stuff doesn't matter so much, you don't really care. And then all of a sudden, now that you do care, it's harder because there's just things in the way. So I think basically you gotta understand that your skills are not better when you're playing serious or not serious. You have the ability that you have all the time. When you're trying to force yourself to do things, it's more awareness control, and it causes it to be a little bit more complicated. And then when you're being more like non-serious, you're not necessarily like trying to micromanage every single element of the activity so that it all works out properly, because you don't really have necessarily like a severe plan. So I think the best thing to do is to understand that you have to develop a narrative that allows you to get serious and make it okay. So you have to wait. You have to wait for the plane to go past, so you can't. So you got to just speak and people will hear you. Or was I talking about the narrative? Yes, we're talking about the narrative of the competition or event, playing in a match, or maybe your friend is just talking hella smack and it's time to show them what's up, whatever. To me, this is what I do. At whatever I thought was important, it's about what this moment isn't important anymore. Now what's important is winning, is doing everything properly, and making sure that my whole focus is on my best behavior, so to speak, as far as doing my game, playing my game as well as I can. And I think the best way to be able to be serious and be comfortable with being serious is that you actually have to know what you're doing enough to be able to fall back on a ritual to carry you to the next moment. And when I say a ritual, meaning that when you're playing pool, if you don't have a system that you can do automatically, i.e. like a ritual where you have it memorized, it doesn't change and there's nothing to add or remove to it, and that it exists on its own, and that you can just fall back on that without having to reconstruct it or like try to imagine it being a certain way. It just lives on its own. And when you can have that thing where you know everything about it and you've done it so many times, you can recreate it at will. Now when it's serious, you can do it because you have that thing, the ritual. And when you're playing pool, it may not appear to be that simple to create a ritual, but if you really break the game down into the moving parts of it, the physical movingness of it, there's really not as much going on as you think. You're moving your body from a position where you're facing a shot. Roughly, you get your alignment proper. You can see what you're about to do. You have a visualization of what you're about to do. And then once you know what you want to have accomplished, then now you are going to just use your ritual to perform the shot in the way that's ideal for your own demonstration. So all you really have to do is understand, well, if I'm moving my body from this standing position, addressing the shot, and then I'm going to end up down on the ball in the same, with alignment, proper alignment, ready to shoot the shot, then all you got to do is understand, okay, well, all I have to do is just eventually, over time, memorize what motions it takes for me to get down to that position where I can shoot that shot successfully from the position of standing. And until you have that memorized, you will not be able to summon it. So what you have to do while you're practicing is start paying attention to what you're doing when you're playing your best pool, and remember it, and then systematize what's happening, memorize the motions, instinctualize them, get them to be where, like, not only can I remember it, but I have ownership of the thing so much that I know that this, I can replicate it whenever I want to. Because if you don't have that locked in where, like, oh, I can do this whenever I want, then when you get to where you want actually to do it, and you're like going to show someone that you can do the thing, that you're competing, you have to have the object there. You have to have ownership of it in order to be able to summon it. And if you have any part of it you don't have figured out, how can you remember the whole thing? You can't, because you haven't actually memorized it yet. And as you're developing with pool, this is part of the trick, is that none of it is really locked in so much necessarily that you can have it locked in where, like, this is what I do in this situation, this is what I do in that situation, because it's constantly, those answers are constantly changing, and that can confuse you. And that's why I say that the goal is to have a ritual. Another play. Yeah, if you want to shut the door, it's not going to help. Not that much. It's super, super loud. Thank you, baby. So if you have all you're really trying to do with pool is, if you want to play top level competitive pool, you have to figure out what it looks like, what it feels like, and what you think like when you're playing your best pool, and then memorize that, and then enhance it and develop it over time, and then you can come with it whenever you want to. The thing is it does take time to, like, warm your body up and all those things to get yourself into the groove. And that's part of the challenge of the game, is realizing that your body is changing too, so you can't rely on it completely. And that's why you have this ritual, this locked in, like, ideal of what you want to have happen, but then you have this body that is not necessarily capable of performing at the highest level possible. So then the other part of being able to come with it is you got to have your body prepared enough to where you have confidence that you can even do the thing that you want to do. And that's where a lot of people fail, is that they have this, it's easy to have the ideal. The hard part is having the objectivity to know what you're really capable of doing, and sticking within the realms of real possibility based off of where you put yourself in that moment of time. You don't always have 100% energy level to just expend and fire away and play, and micromanage everything and think of all the different things and just really try hard. so that you remember everything, and that every little detail and every little nuance and all those things are perfectly memorized. You don't always have that. It's not always, you don't have that energy level where you feel like you just woke up 20 minutes ago and you're like ready to do everything. Whatever, when if you're a morning person, for instance, now it's like late afternoon and you're like a little bit lagging because you've been up for 10 hours already. It's like the day is moving on. Those realities are the things you're really dealing with when you're talking about being able to get to that place where you're playing your game. So there's a level of acceptance, a level of awareness about where this thing is, the meat suit, the condition of it, and all of that, so that you can then use that, what's actually there, to play the shot, the proper shot, given that situation. If you're, I don't know, like, it's common, I think, over the course of the day, that as you get a little bit older, you'll realize is that your vision doesn't work as well at the end of the day as it does at the beginning of the day. So you may not be able to see it quite as sharply. And there's exercises you can do to help, work. And I recommend all of you, if you have vision issues, to work on your vision through doing exercises. It's actually, believe it or not, important for pool, I believe. It's been proven that it's not the most important thing necessarily, as far as it's not going to stop you from being a great player if you don't have good vision, but I certainly believe that it helps. So anything that you can do outside of pool to help your pool game is something that you throw into that if you can, so you can perform better when you want to, because it doesn't really matter how good you play. At the end of the day, it's just about you putting in the time that you put in to find out how good you can get. Everyone else is doing the same thing. There's no like competition, so to speak, with other people. It's like if that person has 50 hours a week to put to pool, and then they use all of that time actually playing pool, then they're going to get better than someone that has the same 50 hours a week that chooses to play pool for 5 of those hours. And then it's just decisions. But you might not even enjoy your life as much if you're the guy that puts in 50 hours versus the guy that puts in 5 hours. It's there's no right way. There's no end of the game. Like, just if you want to get better at pool, we're talking about this, the ritual and all of that. That's what's important here, is having that narrative in your mind that it's like, well, not only do I have everything figured out too, but I've set myself up in a way to where I deserve to win. People that don't practice, they don't play seriously, then they wonder why they fail in tournaments. Well, mostly it's because they're telling themselves that they can't do well, because they don't do the things that they're supposed to do in order to play well and when it matters. And that's a narrative issue, right? The narrative has to be set up to where you can win in any situation. The way that I approach everything in pool and my life is in general is that my assumption is that everything's going to work out for the best. That means that when I go and enter into a tournament, that no matter what happens, I'm either going to learn something or I'm going to win. And in order to win, I need to have a narrative that allows me to win. It could be as simple as, well, I haven't played in a week, and you got another plane. It's like plane time. So if you haven't played in a week, you can create a narrative in your mind of like, well, I haven't been practicing, so I don't deserve to win this tournament, so I'm not going to win because I haven't been practicing, and I need to practice in order to play good. I guess that's the narrative. It's not the truth. You could tell yourself that you're the kind of person that doesn't need to practice because you're ready to win at all times, and that at the moment that it's time to make the shot, that you know exactly what system you're going to employ, and that you also rely enough on the fundamental understanding of physics and knowledge that you don't need to necessarily be in stroke to make a ball. You just have to use the best process that you have. You have to own the ritual. Then when you come back, if it has been like a week, you're like, well, what's my ritual to make this ball? Well, it's, look down the shot line, whatever you have to do. Like for me, I look down the shot line, see the ball go in, you know, feel like I can make it, start seeing that it's possible for the ball to enter the hole, and then address with the cue ball. And then does it look like if I hit it this way that it's going to go in, etc. Connect to the shot, all the things, then get down, shoot the shot. There's a whole list of things, my footwork and all that stuff. It's all part of the feel of it. Like, and then once I kind of like have a feel for what I'm going to do, then I get down and do the thing the way I felt like I was doing it in my imagination, like a rehearsal. That's what I do when I need to play good, is I just go to that. When you're experimenting and trying to learn, you don't have to do all of those things because you're working on other things. You might use your awareness to feel the grip, or to, you know, work on your alignment or whatever it is. Like, those are advancements you can make, and then the rest of it's kind of going to be on autopilot. And then as you get a sense for what the autopilot feels like with the rest of your body, then you can start to use your awareness and focus it on other things. But when you're playing and you want it to happen, mostly I focus on seeing the thing happen. It doesn't matter if I feel good or not. If I can't see the ball go in, it will not go in. That's always been the answer. If you look like you're off and you hit the ball and you're off, then it's like, well, how many times do you need to feel like you're off and then actually hit the ball? You never have to. Once you've proven it to yourself, you're done. You just, when you feel off, it's off. You have to trust yourself, you know. And then that's, to me, that's what's, you know, that's is like, you know, even though you haven't been playing pool, you got to feel like you can make the ball. Otherwise you won't be able to compete at the highest level, you know. And if you're prepared, you're playing a lot of pool, and if you're not prepared, you're not playing a lot of pool. It doesn't matter at that moment. The shots are not necessarily so difficult that you need to be in dead stroke, you know. You just got to pay attention also to what's going on with the cloth, you know, because your ritual will work, but then if you're not aware of the conditions of the cloth or whatever, you have to get you know, develop a feel for that as well, so that you can make the balls actually go where you want. You know, that's what it's all about, is just being like in the moment. Can I just do the thing? You know, having the narrative that allows you to win all the time. It's like, it doesn't matter what the score is. You know, if you have a race to 11, you could just be like, okay, well, if the score is 0-0, what do we do? My mentality is like, well, it's the beginning of the set. I'm going to try to put pressure on this person. I'm going to try to get a feel for the table. Maybe if it's early in the tournament and I don't know the table, later in the tournament, maybe I know the table and now I'm ready to go. I have a new narrative, different narrative, right? 1-0, they win. Now I'm behind 1-0, no big deal. It's early in the match. Whatever happens, happens. You know, maybe I'm up 1-0, 2-0, 1-1. 3-1, 6-8. Each score is a repeated event. There's only so many ways to get to 11. So if you're playing the race, like, all you have to do is eventually realize that it's like, well, you're going to play enough of these to be in all of these scenarios again. And all you have to do is at that moment be like, I know the narrative that I'm going to use to be successful from this position, no matter what the position is. If you're down 8-0 in a race to 11, your narrative should be, wouldn't it be cool if I came back from here and I just won 11 straight? Like, just figured it out. Like, I could take my one shot. You know, they're playing great pool. They give me one little string of hope, and I take that and I pull on it, and it turns into like an opportunity, and then I take that opportunity and I turn that into momentum, and then I turn that momentum into a win through the narrative. If you're down 8-0 and you're telling yourself that you have no chance, and that my opponent is playing like God and I'm getting lucky too, and I can't get anything, my break doesn't work, blah blah blah, all the bad things, it's a possible win. But that's all your narrative. Your body is not changed. Your narrative needs to change. You it's not serious unless you make it serious. Even if you're playing in a world championship event, theoretically speaking, you cannot feel pressure because you've decided that you're not going to feel pressure today. And then you're actually following through with your promise to yourself. But in order to do that, you'd have to have the narrative so locked in that you'd have a story for every moment that happens. 10,000 people watching, and I don't care because I've seen it in my mind, visualized it happening, and I was successful. The moment is with pool is that you're just repeating these cycles. If you're going to play 500 tournaments in your life, you have 500 opportunities to learn how to create a narrative where you can start winning these tournaments. It might take you 100 tournaments to learn how to win a tournament. Once you've won it, now you realize you can be done, and now you realize, okay, well, I can systematize how I'm doing it as well through the narrative. And all you have to do is design a narrative that allows you to be successful from every position of the present moment, moving just into the future a little bit. Like, how did I go about winning from here? The story's already been told up to this point. Now, what is the story going to be like? Even if I lose, the story is like, well, I took the information that I got and I used it, and then I acted upon it, and I made changes and modifications so that the next time when I come to this moment, we're going to have a better outcome than we had the last time, a more desired outcome through the narrative shift. Whatever's happened up till now isn't important. We use that as fuel to create a better, more positive future. That's it. You know what I mean? Do everybody any comments? So I think I'm pretty much
says,
done.
Hi guys, I love your instructional videos. Thank you for sharing. B.E.989.
Nice.
I don't know if that is.
Appreciate your support. I'm glad that it's helping. Feel free to make a comment, leave a comment, a question of anything that you'd like me to talk about in the future. I'd be happy to expand on it as much as I can, which, I can talk a long time about very little sometimes. So the narrative is the thing, and it's just like, you got to go for yourself. You got to decide, okay, what's my narrative in all situations? And I think that with pool, it's nice because it's very generic. Like, it doesn't matter who your opponent is most of the time. It's more about your internal, what am I going to tell myself, when these distractions happen that are going to take you away from the moment. You're like, am I going to be the guy that was in a serious set, maybe it's like getting close to the end, and then I'm down on the 8 ball, and then bro off to the side just walks by, and then I missed the shot, and now I'm telling the story later how I lost the set because the dude walked by and sharked me, when the story could have easily been, I noticed dude was walking by, so I got up, and then I reset, and I cleared my mind, and then I saw the shot, I got back down, and then I was successful, and I went on to win the tournament from there. Those are two narratives. If you're the guy that gets sharked and then lets that sharking affect their results, that's your narrative. If you use that as fuel to improve you, be like, oh, I came here actually to be in this pressure situation, and then any distraction that happens, immediately I respond positively so that I'm not victimizing myself. I'm affirming myself by like, you know what? It doesn't matter what he wanted to do, if he was sharking me or not, on purpose, accidental, that's not what matters. My response is what matters. And I choose to respond in a way that helps me win, because the narrative is being enforced, because I have a narrative that I can win. It's okay to win. It's okay for people to distract me. It's okay for all these things to happen because I have a narrative that allows me to just get back on the horse and then ride my way to victory if it is the way it is. And even if you lose, it doesn't matter, because it's not about what happens so much. It's about the narrative of how you're going to be successful, and then you just continue to enforce that, because that's just obviously a better way in general than having a negative mindset about things and the way that things are, and that, you know, everything has to be a certain way, otherwise you're not going to be happy, you know, and that you can only win under these circumstances. And then now it's like finally worked out, so you know, and then you find another way to make it hard for yourself, you know, when there's plenty. Even the game is difficult enough when you're not backing yourself mentally and emotionally, you know. And if you're, go ahead.
Question is, I recently adjusted my vision center, but now everything is a tiny bit off due to the slight shift left in my stance. Any thoughts, or just keep hitting balls to build muscle memory back up?
Okay, so if you're shifting your vision center, we'll brief aside. So I'm just gonna put the ball here. I don't even know if you can see it or not. So if you're shifting over and now everything looks differently, what you need to focus on, I think, at the beginning is making sure that you're locking in what you're trying to change. And then the rest of what happens will start to happen, and you'll start to just, yeah, the way I would say it is, you don't want to correct. You want to focus on what you're doing, and eventually you will relearn what it looks like with this new thing that you're doing. That's the best way I can explain it. You just got to keep going, and eventually your new viewpoint will become the standard viewpoint and not the non-standard viewpoint, not the new viewpoint. It will just shift over and replace what was already there as your new technique gets more solid and more crystallized into like reality. So you just have to just give it enough time to let your body relearn the memory of what it looks like, the vision of what it looks like, so that when you're like visualizing the shot you're about to shoot and you're down on it, then that natural vision will be the vision of correctness that you're trying to, by making this change and you're shifting. Now you'll be like, okay, well, now what I'm actually seeing is true, and now I just have to just keep hitting it, and then now I'll see how it is, without thinking, oh, I got to do this. Maybe at the beginning you'd be like, oh, that means I'm just gonna have to aim a little bit to the right, but eventually that aiming to the right or aiming to the left to compensate for the change needs to disappear, so that this is how I do it and it works can exist only if you you forget about how you did it before, and now this is the way, and your Fargo or whatever, your skill level will kind of like go down for a second as you make that change, because you know that once it crystallizes into your form and becomes true and natural, that your game will jump up. And that's part of the narrative of it. You gotta like stick with that. Like it's all about the process. The process, you know what I mean? Like, keep paying attention to what you're doing. Keep paying attention to your results. All that stuff, make objective decisions based off of reality about what you need to do to get better at the game, and then just act on it, and then that action that's how you affirm and how you express yourself in the game, is through like, well, I made a change because I decided that I didn't want to deal with an inferior system when I know better. It just takes that effort to know better and then do better, and then to lock in the doing better and make that more just the way I am. I was, now I am another thing, a better thing. I've learned, that what I was doing wrong, didn't have to happen. I just had to just like get in there, So back to, turning on the switch. So I think that another thing that I should talk about here, if we're still on here, is knowing when it's the moment. To me, people don't think about how to activate the switch enough. Like, how do you decide that it's really time? Like, one of Vic's friends recently got assaulted in a parking lot, and then she was telling the story about it, she didn't know that the lady was going to go crazy or whatever she did, and all of a sudden she's getting attacked, and then she's telling the story, and she's like, oh, this is happening, and then the narrative completely changed, where she was like for a second getting beat up a little bit, and then she just like, nope, we're not having that anymore, and then she went, and then the switch was turned on. It's like at that moment the switch got turned on, is my point. And when you're in a competition that you sign up for, you can turn the switch on whenever you choose to. Now, when you're in public and out in the wild, and then an altercation happens, you don't get to decide when the switch gets turned on, and then now you have to be, oh dang, it's on now. You know what I mean? It's really on, because nature is out there doing its thing, and you have to defend yourself. Now, in an artificial scenario where you're going to compete, people think that you turn the switch on when the match starts, but that's actually not how it works. You have to turn the switch on as soon as you sign up for the tournament, because your narrative has to be aligned with, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to give myself the best opportunity to win this tournament. From the moment that I begin, from the moment that the decision has been made to play the tournament, the time is ticking on your amount of preparation that you can put in, and the repetitions that you're going to do, and the mentality that you're going to bring to the tournament and into the matches, and then the setup for that of going to the venue, preparing yourself through all the different things, and then showing up. All that stuff should be important now that we've decided we're going to enter into this competition, so that then when you're actually playing, when you think back on the time that's already passed, you can look at all the evidence of all the good things that you did for yourself up to this moment that make you deserve for the good thing to happen later. If you've done nothing to prepare, and you haven't done anything to think, oh, what am I going to do to win this tournament? How am I going to, even just thinking about what you're going to do, all that time that was happened up until this moment, now we're in the tournament, that all led you to believe what the story is going to be or not. You can BS yourself if you choose to, and be like, oh, I was just going to come in and see what happens, and and all the stuff. Yeah, at the beginning, when you don't know what you're doing, that's fine, because you're trying to gain experience. After a while, you know what's going on. You just need to okay, what am I going to do? And if you're not prepared, then you're not going to be successful. It's part of the simple thing. That doesn't mean necessarily that you need to act physically necessarily and hit tons of balls. You just need to have a narrative that's locked in enough to where you know your identity going into the tournament, that you are this person, and that you don't necessarily get to play as much as 22-year-old person that works part-time, and they get to hit all these balls all the time, and then I have all these responsibilities. But I don't need to hit all these balls, because I'm a grown-up and I have responsibilities and I have control of myself, and I'm a mature person and I have emotional stability, and I have all these things that this person may not have, that they do have time to hit more balls, yes, but I have a system that I run my life that's been successful, and that I can use that system to help me win this tournament. And that person has just still trying to figure it out. Who knows what they're going to do? They might beat me, they might just collapse. Who cares? It's not what's important. What's important is I have a narrative that allows me to win, and that it doesn't matter how many balls I hit. It doesn't matter any of that, because it is all that's happened is well, if we take all this accumulation of things that have happened in our lives, and then we use that to guide us, it doesn't necessarily add up to victory at the end. We need to figure out how to take all this and then convince ourselves that we can be victorious no matter what, even if it doesn't happen, because that is a practice. Is what you don't realize is that you win this tournament, or you level up slightly in the process of trying to win the tournament. Now you start over the next tournament you sign up for. Now we're beginning again, and then we have another repetition of how do we turn. I was like, then you start realizing that the switch is actually always on if you let it be, and that can be your whole life. It's just people think it's too much work, but it's just a habit of being like, well, what do we want to have happen next? Well, we want good things. So it's like, well, let's start thinking about what we want, and it doesn't matter. Then the past is you're setting yourself up where like the whole time I was like doing a little bit of daily reflection. I'm hitting balls. I'm keeping my body limber. I'm eating right. All of these things that prepare myself for an eventual easier success, getting my mind ready to focus on the thing. It's all about realizing that it's like you're feeling pressure because you don't think you're ready, but that's because you haven't realized that you're always ready, because life is just happening the whole time. And it's like when you're on the street, you don't realize that you might be in a situation that you might have to react quickly. You might slip on something and have to act quickly, and if you're not prepared for that moment, something bad could happen. It's the same in a pool tournament. If you're not prepared when when it's a tough match is happening, and maybe your opponent misses a shot that you're surprised about them missing, and then maybe it bobbles and then it rolls to a safe location, and now you have a really tough shot, and then your reaction to that causes you to fall off of your good place that you're at, and now you're not feeling great about it all of a sudden, and then you've allowed the narrative to shift because you have to be like, it doesn't matter what my opponent does or what the situation is. Every time I come to the table, it's exactly the same, because it really is, in a sense. You have to decide what you're going to try to create on the table, the final resting place of all the balls. That's all you have to do every shot. Like, where I want the balls to be. I want the object ball to go in the hole, so it's going to be down, sitting in the box down over here, and then the cue ball is going to be in this spot, so that then the next ball will be easier to make, ideally, with continuation of, position for the next shot. That's every shot. And so all you need to do is just forget about everything that happened before that moment, disappear all the past, take this moment and have a system that's going to allow you to move forward successfully by covering every little thing that could possibly be talked about in the shot. Every question that could be asked, you have an answer for, because you've studied the game enough to be okay with your level of understanding of it. It doesn't matter if my level of understanding is higher than yours is, and you can't answer all my questions. That's not what matters. What matters is, can you answer all of your questions that you have? Because those are the things that are going to come up that take you off of your spot. Having an idea in your mind, a half kernel of a negative thought where you're like, well, I don't know, if the ball goes past this other ball, it might be blocking it, and then you're on the 2 ball, and then that shot is like 3 balls down the road, and you haven't done the work of just looking, and now you know the answer. And now when you're down on the 2 or ball or whatever early on, you don't have that question lingering back here. And those things are the accumulation of like, what am I not doing that I should just do to make my life more visible, have transparency for what's about to happen, so that I have less things to worry about, more things to be in control of, so that we can be more confident with what we're doing, if that makes sense. The moment of the shot, it begins, it's not moving. All we're doing with pool, to simplify it way down, right, is like, I'm going to move my body into a position and strike the ball and make something happen. All you're doing, in a sense, is just trying to move your body as precisely as possible. So we just have to have that, like my exact motion. You get down on the ball, you should be getting down exactly the way that you want to every time. And if you don't know what you want your body to come down on the ball like, then you know what to work on, because you have to be like, this is every time I get down on the ball like this, it goes in, because that's the way it's supposed to go. You know what I mean? And if you haven't just decided that this is what I want my game to look like, what I want it to feel like, how can you ever be satisfied with anything? You know, and that's part of the quest of pool, is just keep evolving your technique and evolving your motion to where it feels more like you. Not effortless necessarily, because there's effort involved in everything that you do, but it should be to where there's no adding anything into it would make it worse. That's the best way to explain it. It should be the minimum amount of extra stuff. You know, if you want it to be flashy and like have all these, you know, extra little shoulder pumps or whatever in your pre-strokes, you know, go for it. You're marrying yourself to that motion through a habit, you know, and if you want to have that, then keep it. If you don't, then you need to work towards dehabitualizing that and opening yourself up to a different rhythm or whatever it is that's more like what you want. That's part of the switch, is just being like, well, I know what I feel like when I'm performing. Not only that, but I can actually take what I am now and win with it, because that's really what it is. Like, well, I could have won, but I was too tired. People say that, and it's laughable to me, because, and I'm not saying that doesn't affect you, but, you know, the reality of life is that everyone's heard the story of, you know, the lady whose son got trapped under a car and she lifted the car up to pull him out, you know, and then who knows if that lady got enough sleep that night. Doesn't matter. She did the thing. And that's the thing, is like, you put the narrative is that at that moment, you can tell yourself you're too tired, or you can tell yourself that this is actually just the way it is, and that I'm going to make this shot regardless of my desire to be not fatigued right now. You know what I mean? I am fatigued. That's fine. It's not going to stop me from doing the thing. And that's part of the narrative. It's all comes to the narrative. It's like, well, if you think you're too tired, then you are. I don't know what else to tell you. You know, if you didn't get enough sleep and you can't stay awake right now, that's part of what you weren't prepared, and you knew that going into it, and now you're acquiescing to that narrative that you've already created from the beginning, and now you're just following along with it. You know, and you could have a different narrative, which is like, well, I actually am just going to win anyways. It doesn't matter. You know, you could be like Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice right now. Why are we talking about practice? You know what I mean? He's a baller. He just wants to win, play the game. Like, he's not trying to practice. He knows he's ready. That's what it is. So you can be whoever you want to be, and that's just part of the narrative of it. The switch only needs to get turned on if it's off. You know, not to say that you have to have like full at attention the whole time, like revved up, but just being like here in the moment, ready to do the thing that needs to be done. That's part of the preparation of it. You know, it's just being like, oh, I'm ready to do the thing. You know, like, yeah, I know I'm not going to be like at my best physically all the time, but my mind has a system that works good under that situation. I don't force myself to have the highest energy level, drink a bunch of caffeine and get amped up and ready to go so I can win this tournament. Because 2 days later, when you've had 5 Red Bulls, you know, now you're in the middle of, at the end of the tournament, and you're like getting tired and you're wondering where all your energy went, but you spent it all already, you know. And then the person that's just like healthy, you know, and has decent cardio is just chilling the whole time, because they know that it's not about like one shot. It's just, you just got to be around long enough, and then, you know, you just survive till the end. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to hardly do anything that should be energetic. It's pool. It's actually a casual, relaxing game. You know, you don't have to swing your arm that fast. You know, you don't have to throw a baseball 100 miles an hour. the cue ball, the maximum velocity is like 25 miles per hour on the brake. The rest of the time you're hitting it pretty soft, and that's just like boom. That's enough power to do almost all of it. You don't need caffeine to do that. You know what I mean? Not to say that it won't help you be more precise, but there's a cost benefit analysis for everything that you do, and that's just part of how you decide to live your life. That's your narrative. So, do we have anybody else? I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Nope.
Cool. So yeah, the turning on the switch. Ultimately, it's a little bit of a misnomer. You know, when it's time, it's time. You know, but to me, if you know it's about to be time, or you know the time is coming, it's already time. I hope that makes sense. There's no like turning the switch on. As soon as you sign up for an event, as soon as you decide you're going to do the thing, the switch has been on. Now it's the question is like, am I creating a narrative right now that allows me to take the time from now until the moment? And that leads me towards where I can be successful. If I'm doing things that are countering my ability to be successful, I'm just setting myself up to fail knowingly. And, you know, and even if you're doing things that are going to maybe not be as optimal as possible, as long as your narrative is such that you're okay with it, because you're going to be fine anyways. You know, if you like, well, I don't have time to practice because I got to hang out with my son. Well, you know, it is what it is. You know, you're not going to necessarily be as good of a player if you do that. However, you know, your life is your life, and you have to choose to do the things that you are important to you. You know, and if your priorities are the way they are, then you should be just being in alignment with that, and then everything's going to be fine. You know, you don't have to win the tournament. The goal is to just do as best as you can. You know, but that's partly the narrative. You know, you're learning, you know, and it's like, it isn't as many balls as you hit, all that stuff. That only matters if you think it does. Once you like know what you're doing, you know, then now it's about doing it, you know, and practicing helps, definitely, no question about it. But also being mentally and emotionally ready to win is actually probably more beneficial than practice. I would say at the moment that the thing's happening, if you're not confident, then that's probably the thing that needs to be changed, not whether or not you hit more balls. Hitting more balls might make you feel more confident, and that's what's helpful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make the shot. If you've done it before, you can do it again, and that's, you know, it doesn't really matter if you're like feeling like you can do it or not. The truth is your body's capable of producing the amount of power required to shoot every single shot in the pool. And the reason why we're not doing it is a knowledge thing. It's not an energy thing. Knowledge of that we can do it now, it's part of it. Anyways, if you've gotten to this point, get involved with our school group. It should be in the pinned comment. We're just adding this to the database through the YouTube channel as well. We appreciate any support. Comments are great because, you know, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I really want to help people improve their pool game and their mentality. And if you're struggling with certain things, I want to talk about it. You just have to, you know, give the comment. Apologies for the dog. He's being a little wild right now. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great day and enjoyed this video, and hope it was a little bit of benefit to you, if not a lot, just to expose you to a little bit more of the mental thing about how I look at being serious about what you're doing. Thank you.